that the only reason a judge now can remove is for cause. It's no longer that I don't like you, it's for cause now. Those are the salaries. You see where we're at. And the other thing that I'll make a comment to you, I've asked for it for several years. Sorry that Ms. Barnes is in here. The main complaint on the Access and Fairness Survey was we don't have an online payment system. We don't have e-ticketing. Pine Mountain, Harris County, LaGrange, now the City of Albany, all have e-ticketing and have online payment systems. We've got a vendor that's willing to provide it.
What are the hurdles to?
I have no idea on that one because
Well, I'm asking the Deputy City Manager.
On the e-ticketing, that was something that was approved in the budget several years ago. Major Sweeney has been working on that project, but as I believe he's expressed to the judge, the RMS project had to be implemented first. And so once that's completed, then he'll begin the process of e-ticketing. We've also included in the budget for FY17 to begin the replacement of the court management system. And once we're off the mainframe and we're onto a web-based court management system, we'll be able to do online payments. So we are heading in that direction.
I know it's probably early in it, but is there a projected timeline that we think we ought to have them accomplished? Like,
I'll have to check with Major Sweeney on the e-ticketing. I'm not sure.
When you do, if you could kind of bring us some kind of idea of what type of efficiencies it'll create and how that'll translate to savings.
Sure.
Mr. Anderson, real quickly, the comments I've read about the e-ticketing, for example, if you get stopped by a trooper, he can write you a ticket in 3 minutes and you're gone. Handwriting tickets takes 20 minutes or longer. That's an inconvenience to the citizen, and I think, I'm sorry if I put it this bluntly, I think we need to stop that inconvenience to the citizen.
Well, I know it's inconvenient to the citizen, but it's also a way to get the police officer back
on the street.
On the street quicker, if that's the case. Well, we'll look into that. And Judge, you've come up here and you've lobbied the past several years for salaries, and and it's one of those deals where there's no doubt that with your caseload that we ought to be paying more. It's just right now. I don't know where we would pull the funds, but we do probably need to, over the next several years, look at maybe how we're operating our recorder's court, how they're being paid, how many judges we've got, what the case disbursement load is, and how we're going about compensating them.
Just one comment, Mr.
Yes,
Anderson. If you look, Gwinnett County, you got $143,000 for 3 judges, each three. The caseload makes their caseload about $27,000 each. So, and I'm doing roughly 65 to 70% of 68,000 cases.
Noted. Thank you, sir. Glad to see you mending a little bit. Any other questions for the judge?
Still got a ways to go, Mr. Anderson.
Well, take care of yourself.
I'm trying.
And thank you for what you do. Thank the other judges as well.
Next, we'll have Planning Director Rick Jones.
Good afternoon. I want to try to make this as quick and as painless as I possibly can for you when we're going through this. The whole intent of this is to let you understand and know about what fees we do actually collect on behalf of the city for the operations we deal with in the planning department itself. This gives you an idea here of what the fees we actually do collect now in terms of dealing with zoning itself, with the applications, with a special exception use itself that comes before us, zoning verification letter when someone will ask for whatever they need in terms of dealing with real estate or some other item. They'll come and ask for a letter that we basically have to certify that the property is zoned a certain way or what conditions it comes with it. We also deal with subdivision plats as they come in when subdivisions, where pieces of property are subdivided. We come in and have to have a fee for that as well from that standpoint. We also deal with 2 boards that require additional fees, and that's the Board of Historic and Architectural Review, which, as the name implies, deals with all the historical aspects of property throughout the community itself. and then the Uptown Facade Board, which deals with those facades in the Uptown area as well from that standpoint. These are our current application fees now as we go through this. And let me say this up front, I should have said this at the very beginning. We are not a revenue generator for the city. I'm not here tonight to tell you that. We're making big money for you, because we're not. You're going to see what I'm going to show you. But our intent really is, though, to cover our costs when something comes forward, so that we do at least break even during our operation. That's our sole intent. Right now, for our rezoning applications themselves, if you're looking at this, is for a major rezoning, we're looking at $1,000 for that. Minor rezoning is $700. A special exception use is $500, and a conditional zoning change is another $500 as well for that.
Rick, I'm sorry for interrupting, but what is the difference between a major and a minor? How do you define the two?
The Unified Development Ordinance defines a major rezoning as anything really based on the number of units, particularly for housing, the size of the building itself, anything greater than 100,000 square feet, or any other associated task with that sets it over and beyond just a regular zoning from that standpoint. And the reason being is it requires additional time. We get another rezoning in here, like something along the lines like Columbus Park or something else. It takes an additional time for staff to go through that and go through that process with the applicant to make it work. So that's why there's a difference here between a major and a minor from that standpoint.
Thank you.
The Board of Historical and Architectural Review, or BHAR, itself, board case right now is $25. If you're going to do a demolition, it's $100 from that. And then a staff approval, where you can come in and we look at it, and as long as it meets the criteria, we can basically approve it at that point. It's $10 to do that. For the Uptown Facade Board, though, is we don't charge anything. Right now, when you come in an application for the change of the facade of a building or something of the overall appearance for an area, we still have to review it and still have to look at it. But right now, we're not charging actually any fee for that process. And looking at this, we break it down in terms of what it actually costs us to do the work, though, from that standpoint. Right now, if we're doing a zoning application, it's going to cost us right around $900 for the staff to actually look at it. And that's beyond, really, it goes really beyond the planning department itself in terms of staffing. Because we're not only including ourselves, we're also including folks from engineering, we may be including folks from public works, maybe including the city attorney's office. Those are all factors and all have to be reviewed as part of this process in terms of making things happen. The operational cost for that we estimated at $132. That's the copying, that's the mailing of the letters out, that's anything that goes on with that process in terms of getting the application process itself from that standpoint. And so for our total cost, that's a little over $1,000, and what it actually costs us right now, on average, to do a zoning in this community. The same thing about special exceptions. I won't go through all that for you. You can see what it takes for us to do those costs in terms of what it actually involves the process itself. Same thing for BHAR, or Board of Historical and Architectural Review. We're looking at right at $150 to do those applications and process them and go through and do the review and get everything together for that. As I said, we're not charging anything right now for Uptown Facade Board, but on average, it's costing us a little over $200 just to process those applications. And that's money we're not getting back at this time in any way, shape, or form from that. This is what we're looking at, though, we're proposing in terms of looking at what it actually cost us and what we're actually getting back in terms of revenue from this. We did 31 cases this last year around in terms of zoning. We cost it for a little over $32,000 to do those 31 cases. The existing revenue was right at $27,300. And then I should say the other thing that's part of that cost that you need to know about is we have to run an ad in the paper as well. And that is not cheap. I can tell you that from experience, that is just not a cheap cost to us. That sometimes can run us like $150, $200 a time when we do that. But you can see that we're actually showing a negative balance here of about $4,800 just dealing with the zoning application. Same thing can be said about special exceptions here. We're running a deficit of about $950 for the cases. We only really had 3 over that time frame. For the Board of Historical and Architectural Review, we had 72 cases, and we're losing right around $9,200 every time we did those cases together. And then, of course, we're not charging anything for Uptown Facade Board. you're going to lose money anyway right now, which is about $5,600 that we took basically out of the planning department's budget to help actually cover those costs from that standpoint. These are what we're looking at, proposed application fees. Again, we're not a revenue generator for the city. All we're trying to do is basically pay for the cost of the operations, what it takes for us to do these things.
Rick, excuse me. Councilor Allen?
Thank you. Rick, does the city code allow us to shift the cost of the ad in the paper where you have to post it or advertise it? Could you require the applicant to do that?
We could, but I wouldn't advise it, because once we lose control of that process, then we have no credibility ourselves, because what you look for us to do is make sure every step is followed in that zoning process. We could ask, in terms of dealing with the notification process, you could say, well, the applicant can do this or the applicant can do that, but we would lose control of that function. I would much rather for us maintain that in-house, have that fee come to us, and then we take care of making sure the letters go out, that the signs are posted. We require I should say that we require the applicant to actually post the signs. But as far as the ads themselves go and the notification to the adjoining property owners, that's the responsibility really of the planning department.
Well, I guess I was referring more to the ad in the paper. If you gave them a basic form that they had to follow and fill in the blank kind of thing, and this is what you have to take to the newspaper, and you pay that fee, and that would cut you a little bit.
Maybe, but I'm not at that comfort level where I would say we just give that to somebody and say, you make sure it gets in the paper, because we have to make sure, again, meeting that 15-day requirement by state law, that we put the ad in the paper ourselves.
Skip.
Oh, I'm sorry. The city
Yeah, I was going
attorney.
to say, is there a maximum fee you can charge them on a zoning application? I mean, council can increase that fee if necessary, but planning has got to control the advertisement process, because, otherwise they could claim something wasn't followed and it was planning's fault. They've got to control that process.
Yeah. We can control the cost in terms of what we propose to you, but in our estimation, and I guess based on case law as well, we have to show a direct correlation in terms of what the cost we're charging is not over or excessive in terms of what we're trying to achieve here. So we're trying to make sure we at least cover our basic cost here in whatever we may do.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
What we're proposing here is, again, to cover those costs involved with this, is going from major, going to $1,500 from $1,000. Minor would go from $700 to $1,000 itself. The special exception use would actually jump from $500 to $1,000 for that, again, to help us cover that cost. Conditional zoning changes would be the same thing, $500 to $1,000. The cases we go to the Board of Historic and Architectural Review, we would double that board case from 25 to 50. In some cases, and I don't say this, and this is really is applicable to both boards here, BHAR and to Uptown Facade. Some folks will make an application just to make an application, because there is no free charge for it, especially in dealing with the Uptown Facade Board. We will get a case that may come in right at the last minute. We are trying to curtail that and make sure they understand there's a time limit, but there's nothing that really encourages, that's the best way I'd say, encourages folks to come in with a valid application. Someone will come in and just submit an application just to see how things fly. And we think that in terms of dealing with these application fees, we'll cut down a lot of that in terms of some of the aggravation that comes with it. The board cases go from BHAR go from 25 to 50. Demolition would go from 100 to 1,000, because in that particular case, and anybody dealing with historical buildings or properties in this community will tell you, we need to try to discourage folks as much as we possibly can with some demolition, because again, that just kind of comes in and folks say, we'll just take our chance with it and so forth, and see how it actually plays out in terms of doing demolitions on some buildings, particularly historical structures in the community. Staff approval just go from 10 to 20 on that aspect as well. We're not charging anything right now for the Uptown Facade Board. We had on here $150. The Facade Board met late yesterday afternoon. I've been told now that they would rather see a fee of at least $50 on that. the $50 would be fine, but it still does not cover the cost we're trying to achieve here with that idea. And again, the same thing we do, like we do with BHAR for demolition, we do the same thing for facade, and go for $1,000 on that.
Councilor Thomas.
Mr. Jones, if the property is, can the property be covered, I guess is the question, by both BHAR and the Uptown Facade
It
Board?
could, yes, ma'am, that's a great
And
question.
would both of those fees then apply, or the higher one?
Okay. I'm being told, Will's telling me that facade boards, they would waive their fee if both were actually involved. If you had a property with both historical and in the uptown area itself, facade would waive that fee from that standpoint. So there would be a double
The
dip.
Facade Board doesn't waive the fee, isn't that our fee?
Well, that's the suggestion they're making to us on that. But Councilor Thomas, you're correct. That could happen where you have a property that has both of those entities involved with it.
I guess maybe the case, the board case fee, I could see that you pay both fees. The demolition, I mean, if let me back up. If my property is covered by both, then I have to appear, or I have to deal with both of those entities. And so I can see that the board case fee perhaps should be charged by both entities. But if I'm going to demolish my building, I only do that once, so maybe I just pay one demolition fee. I don't know if that's too fine a line, or...
No, I think it's a valid point in terms of, because the evidence or information they present to one board, they're going to present to the other. And I think that cost could be covered in those situations by just at one time, at one fee, that $1,000 or whatever it is.
Right.
I think that would be covered just at one time. I think we could write that into this so that it would happen that way.
If it happens to be in both areas of jurisdiction, BHAR and the facade, which doesn't happen too often, but
No.
if it happens to be in both, then maybe they could only pay one time.
I think that would be the fair thing to do, to be honest, yes.
On both the board case and the
Yes.
demolition?
I would think you just pay that one time, yes.
The higher fee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilor Baker.
Rick, what's the justification for the demolition fees going so high? Is that just as a deterrent, or is there actual cost and time involved to that extent?
The quick answer is yes to all the above, because it really does involve that. There is a great deal of staff time that will go into that, into a demolition work. But also it requires some thought process from the applicants, knowing that when they come forward with that they are serious about what the demolition could be or what it may actually involve, particularly if it's historical property in the community. To ask them really to think through that process with us, to show due cause about why that building would have to come down or be modified under this requirement. There are some stipulations also as well in terms of what staff would have to go through in dealing with that, probably also dealing with state agencies as well, to make sure that demolition could go forward. So yeah, that's a cost that we think is justifiable in terms of trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Appreciate what y'all do.
Next on the agenda will be the Engineering Director, Donna Newman, and followed by the GIS Supervisor, Jeff Griffin. We kind of put him in between engineering and IT, so if there's questions about the transition, we have both of them here to answer those.
Fine.
Just a little bit of history on our current fees. An ordinance was passed in 2006 establishing our review fees. You have them up there. I'm not going to go through and read them, each one of them. And then also in 2003, the state passed a law mandating land disturbing activity fees for those activities over 1 acre of land disturbing. It's $80 per disturbed acre, and 40 of that goes to the local issuing authority, and 40 goes to the state. Either the developer or the contractor pays that to the state. And those are fees that we have to pay as well for our projects, except the whole $80 goes to the state at that point in time. Just a little background, these are the cities and counties that we compared our fees to. They're roughly equivalent in size. Our proposed fee revision, I know it's going to be difficult to follow it. You find all kind of variations on how different communities charge fees. So what I did in your packet that we just gave you is we attached a copy of their sheets of how their fees are paid for each of those comparison cities. What we're proposing for residential subdivisions, urban, which would be those that have curb and gutter, is a review fee of $400 plus $15 per lot. Also included with that would be an erosion and sediment control fee of $200, and then adding an inspection fee for $100 per acre. Right now, all of that's been covered in one fee, and we have at least 8 different people that can be involved in a plan process, as far as engineer level to inspector. We have 4 inspectors in the field, and then you also have the city arborist, and all of these people are involved in the plan process. For a residential subdivision, where rural subdivision would be those where the lots are about an acre, and typically have open ditches instead of curb and gutter and inlets and pipes. And again, you see the fee that we're proposing for that. Non-residential, which would be like commercial and industrial type development, we're proposing different fees, very similar but a little bit different. And the difference in the fee schedule is in subdivisions and in rare occasions, some commercial, if they're doing a commercial subdivision or an industrial subdivision. For a subdivision, they're going to have facilities that the city's going to accept for maintenance, so that's going to require a little more effort on our part. On commercial sites, on multifamily residential, those are more private. A lot of their systems are private, so we're just at that point in time making sure things are designed to standard and making sure inspection-wise that they're putting in what the plan requirements are. We're not doing as much quality control, with the exception of the erosion control stuff, as we would be if it's something the city's going to take over maintenance for. Minor land disturbance, pretty much holding the same fee for that. It's currently $50. We're just going to add a $25 inspection fee. The same for driveway and access encroachment. An access encroachment would be just work on our right-of-way, different from a driveway. And then we are proposing to add some new fees. A state water determination, that requires at least 2 members of the staff to go out in the field to look at a channel to determine if it's state waters or not, or where typically a lot of times there's a stopping and starting point that we have to determine, and obviously that can take some time. So we're proposing to charge a $150 fee for that. And then we are instituting some penalties because it requires a lot of staff effort. When we find somebody out there working without a permit, they're typically issued a citation, and then they have to go to court, and then we have to meet and try to contact them. So there's a lot of effort that goes into that. So we want to discourage that kind of activity, of course. And so we've proposing some penalty fees. Another problem that we have a lot of times is because the engineers are put under pressure to get plans in, get them approved, a lot of times we become their quality control. So they submit a set of plans, we have to review them, we find a lot of errors, they go back, and then they have to resubmit them, and sometimes that can take 2 and 3 submittals. So we want to discourage that. We've provided them common errors, we meet with them periodically, We give them written comments. So we hope if it starts costing them a little bit more, because it takes more of our time every time we have to review that set of plans, that this would help discourage some of that, and they would take more effort on the front end and get them correct. And then typically what happens is when we approve a permit, we allow that permit to stay open for a year. And as long as they're actively working on the projects for that year, then we don't require them to reapply. But if they don't start their work within a year, then typically they have to reapply. And so we added a fee, because we had one recently come up where they're getting ready to start, but the year was up. So we would allow them to extend it for $50 for 3 months. And again, this is something that when a plan is approved, we have to monitor it to make sure they haven't started work. They're supposed to notify us, but they don't always do that. So once we approve a plan, that requires effort on our part to continue to stay on top of it. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Newman? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Griffin. I'm the GIS coordinator with the engineering department. I've been asked to come in this afternoon to speak with you and talk with you about the proposal in the budget to move the GIS division from the engineering department to the information technology department. So to do that, I want to talk to you about the state of GIS and how we got here today. About 2 years ago, I was informed that the tax assessor's office was going to be updating their software and going to a new system. As you know, the GIS is a major supporter of the tax assessors, and they use our technology. So at that time, I wanted to be sure that we were servicing them correctly and doing business the way that they needed for us to do in the 21st century. So we asked for a needs assessment to be part of that plan. The biggest thing that they noticed that we were doing that wasn't the way that was most efficient was that we were located in a department, being the engineering department, and not in a service department such as information technology. So what I wanted to do first is to show you how GIS is being used within the city today. And so you can see that about every 3 years or so we have aerial photography flown, and you can see that, thank you. From this aerial photography, we can see that there's a house here located on this street. 3 years later, we see that this house has been demolished, and we also add the tax parcels to this. And so now you can see a visual representation of where the parcel lines are for this property. So we've got two databases being shown here right now. We've got the aerial photography, and we've got tax parcels. Along with the tax parcels, we would know who owns this property and where the property lines are. The next data layer that you see here is the streets. So now we know that we're on Forsyth Street, and we can see the parcels and the aerial photography. We also maintain addresses for the city. So now we see that we're looking at 2512 Forsyth Street. So now each time we add one of these layers, we're adding more rich information and functionality to this map. So now we can route to this address based on the street, and we can see that in 2010 there was a house there, in 2013 there is not. Now we're adding the zoning to this, and we see that this particular property is zoned residential. We can see that right across the street that there's neighborhood commercial, and we know that there are some stormwater pipes there. We know where the inlets are. We know where the outlets are. So right there we've got 5 or 6 different layers of data. Each one of those layers represents a database or a business process of a particular department. So we've got about 5 different departments represented on this one slide. So there's a lot of return on investment that's realized by using GIS the way we're doing it right now. We have about 85 to 100 more layers that we could add to this particular map. Each one of those layers, probably a third of those are engineering layers, a third of those are planning, and then the last third are divided up between various departments. As you can see, the city's invested a lot of money. You've been very supportive to our division into engineering. We get a lot of return on investment on this. Every city employee has access to the layers that you see right now. Every citizen of Columbus has access to these layers, and it causes a great deal of efficiency, the sharing of this information. But if I were to put much more information on this map, it would become cluttered very easily. If I could, just off the top of my head, we could add bus routes to this. I can tell you that this particular property is in the enterprise zone. I can tell you who the owners of these properties are. I can tell you what council district this is in. So as I start to lay more layers on here and put more data on here, it gets confusing. So to harness all of this data, remember all this is coming from different departments, what we really need is more training and more access to the technology. And that was the next thing that our needs assessment told us. Each time we add layers, we get new ideas, we get new information. We could add special enforcement data to this. We could add our 311 calls to this. We could add all of our city assets. We could put where there's a bus stop, where there's benches, where there's hydrants. Capital improvement projects would be put here. If this is the enterprise zone, that would be very important. We could put the permits on here. We could know when there was going to be a new house built, when something was going to be demolished. So what we're doing really is taking this map and turning it more into an application. So to keep this from getting so cluttered, we want to have targeted applications. We could have a zoning app, a crime app, a permitting app, and we could have those in the form of tablets and smartphones. So by using this in all of the city departments, we really move this from a departmental function to a citywide function. It needs to be in a citywide department like information technology. If we put the GIS at the table and bring everybody around the table, we get much more return on our investment. And that increases, again, our transparency. Our citizens, again, would have access to this information. We can be more responsive to our citizens, improves our efficiency and our productivity, makes our citizens safer, and makes our employees more reliable. This chart I included here, this shows you all the great reasons for using GIS. Some of the things that I've already said there, the biggest things there are making the community safer, saving money. These are truisms. Everybody wants these things. And putting us in the IT department is the best way to do that. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Griffin? Councilor Thomas?
I know that moving the GIS for managerial purposes, if you will, under IT, are you going to move, actually physically move, or are you going to stay? You're in the annex now,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Are you going to stay there? Are you going to move to the
plan is to eventually move us to IT.
IT department?
Yes, ma'am.
That depends on space availability.
Okay. But for right now, people can still find you at the annex, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Great.
ma'am. And our goal, just as a comment, our goal is, because engineering will have GIS technicians and engineering to continue adding to the GIS database that's in GIS, all of our databases. The goal will be to have technicians in each of the locations, like at tax assessors, like at the annex, like at the government center, and they can do basic functions at all of those locations. The commonality is looking up addresses, getting a copy of a map so that everybody would be able to do that. So we're not sending citizens from, inevitably we will have to send citizens on occasion if there's some kind of gap in the information that's on the system. Otherwise, if it's just a basic request, we'll be able to perform it there.
And, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was just going to, as I did last week, I want to continue to point out our shining stars in this government, and Jeff Griffin is certainly one of those, and if you had given him a few more minutes, you would have been even more impressed with the work he has done. But his work has been so great that it would be selfish of engineering to hold him in just the engineering department and not spread all this good stuff citywide from one department to another. So it will no longer be just a departmental function, but a city-wide function, and you can see why. He's talked about how you can do transit routes and all this zoning, and I mean, it crosses every department line, and for us to have made, you to have made the investment that we've made and continue to keep it departmentalized would not be wise. And so I wanted to just point to him and say he has done tremendous work. He's a shining star in this government, and the results of his work will be felt citywide because we will be more efficient in what we do, and citizens can take advantage of this as well. So I just had to point that out to you.
No, you actually beat me to it. Jeff is, and what he knows about this GIS system is mind-boggling. I mean, at some point you just feel the air whooshing and just going over your head, but he actually came to my place of business and instructed some of our folks on how they could utilize the city's GIS to help them in their business. And this is the kind of technology, he had a short conversation because it didn't take long for him to figure out I was a dummy when it came to this, but this is the kind of technology that I think the governments are looking for to be able to hold down their head count, to be able to utilize some of the technology available to go out there and visit, virtually visit some of the sites and do some assessments that it takes an individual 40 minutes round trip to get out there and look at. So I'm very excited about the move. I think it's a great fit. I think he's going to be where he belongs because I think these ripples are going to go throughout the entire city government.
Well, and I want to commend Donna Newman as well, because she saw that we just can't hold this. We got to, and she came to me and said, we need to do this. And so she could have been selfish and said, well, I'm not letting them out of my department, But
this is truly an organizational change. There's no cost associated with it whatsoever unless there is a physical move.
So, well, we're just moving the division.
Right.
And there is no cost other than,
right.
Yeah, the physical move. If and when we're able to move him from, on a space availability basis from where he sits now.
It's technology. He could probably do it from home. But no, he can't.
Well, yeah, literally, yes, you're right. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Jeff, thanks. Donna? He does a good job.
Next on the agenda is the IT Director, Forrest Tolley, and if there are any questions about the transition, we had him, Jeff, in between Donna and Forrest to be able to answer your questions.
Don't want you to panic. This is what I showed you last year. And I just wanted to update you on what we've done in a year, and then I hope to update you at budget time or other times on the different things that my budget has allowed me to do. Last year I came to you with these requests, and I just want to share where we are a little bit and take questions if there are any. So on the update, network engineer, very critical. We didn't have one at the time I became director, and we have an engineer doing a great job. In fact, with your approval, we have 3 network engineers. One was new with a lot of experience, and then we moved 2 of our internal staff to engineering positions. So thank y'all for that. Core switch and network infrastructure. we are about ready to complete the infrastructure upgrade at the tower. And really, it's not at the tower. We have core infrastructure at this building, at the annex, and at the tower. So when we talk about core switch, in your mind, think of it as core switches, because it's really located, distributed amongst 3 buildings. That should be complete by July 1. We've added 5 locations to the wired area network. In other words, we've added 5 locations to city-owned fiber, so that we're moving towards managing our own fiber network and increasing the speed between our locations. In addition to that, we've upped the speed between this building and the annex and the tower. It was at a gigabit. We're now at 40 gigabits, and we have the potential to go to 80 gigabits in speed. Just with changing out the core switch gives us that ability. The LAN, which is the wiring in the buildings, we have completed 6 locations, and we are adding more locations each month. That's where we actually go in and do an assessment. Like, for instance, this building is still not, their LAN's not completely, I didn't count this because this building doesn't have a completed wireless network. We are almost there. We have a few spots that we haven't completed. Once we complete those, because that's part of your building network. So we're putting in wireless, and we're also wiring buildings like the fire departments and the police precincts. Upgrading our licensing. We've upgraded the license toward cloud solutions. We're now moving things. We have a local backup. In other words, we back up stuff here at the tower, and then we move it off into the cloud to a very secure network. And we're in the process of moving our backups. And then once we get the backups moved to the cloud, and that happens weekly, we also want to make the cloud part of our disaster recovery. In other words, you've heard that if a system goes down, if you have disaster recovery, you can get it back up in several hours because you actually have it on a cloud-based solution. So we're moving towards that model.
Excuse me, Councilor Woodson?
Forrest, I'm sorry, forgive my naiveness, but can you explain to me the difference between wireless and Wi-Fi? Because I thought it was the same thing.
It probably is. I think that sometimes people call Wi-Fi, meaning like a Verizon or a AT&T, they like to call that Wi-Fi, whereas a lot of times your wireless, they considered it maybe when it's wired back into our network. But there's really no difference between Wi-Fi, MiFi, wireless. As far as you have to have a device to connect to, and I think people kind of use them all interchangeably. So when we talk about wireless or Wi-Fi or MiFi, it really depends on how you're connected, or in your mind, really there's no difference. It's just that I have my device, I didn't plug in, and I connected and got out to the internet or got out to the network. So there's really no difference. It's just whichever term you really like to use.
Okay, I was just wondering because I thought this building, when we constructed it, it was Wi-Fi.
It does, but every part of the building wasn't covered. And
okay.
There's coverage and density, and basically coverage means I can stand here and get a signal, and density means how many people can we get on in this room. So we're trying to address both. Every part of the building's not covered, and if we tried to get 500 people on in this room, we couldn't. And of course, we never want to probably get 500 on in this room, but we would like to get, you know, the capacity of the room, typical session. So really, we have wireless in this building. It's just not a completed network because we don't have 100% coverage, and we've had to add some wireless that goes outside the building so the police cars can connect too. So that's what I mean by a completed network, is when we consider it 100% covered so you can stand anywhere in and around the building and get it. And also, if there were 200 people trying to get on, everyone could get on at one time.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Sorry for the naiveness.
No problem. Good question, very good question. Also, we're moving towards, with our upgrading our license, we're moving toward the cloud-based, but it also is our email. So we still have to add about maybe 1,500 more email licenses over the next few years. and then we'll be completely cloud-based with that solution. And it's not just email, but I wanted to point out email because that's one thing that almost everyone understands. But the basic cloud solution, and by cloud it could be here or somewhere else, but the cloud solution means that you just open your computer and you get on Internet Explorer or Firefox or Safari and you can get it. So that's kind of what we're looking towards. A cloud solution is really a web type solution. It's really browser based, or it can work on your phone, something like that. So we're not really meaning that it has to necessarily be away from the city, but it is capable of being away from the city. So cloud-based just means that we can move it around, and it could be stored local at the tower, or it could be stored on the internet, but it actually opens up in your browser like you would when you go on the internet. I'm going to reverse the order on this slide. Integrated HR payroll finance budgeting system implementation. We've started implementation, and the go live date for the entire solution is January of 2018. So that's not too far away, about 18 months. I put 24 months because in the case of an implementation, once it goes live, I still have to maintain the legacy system for a time after that. In other words, what we're using now, you have to keep on. So for me, the project lasts until they say, hey, you can really turn off the old stuff, that we feel comfortable with the new stuff. So my project time plan is a little bit longer than the go live because IT actually has to maintain both systems for a period of time after it goes live, if that makes sense. So we're started on that. The integrated court, jail, court, public safety, enterprise system, we're actually working with the jail, courts, clerks, public safety to determine the system. I've met with the clerks. I'm meeting with the sheriff's department. We'll be meeting with the marshal's office. We have in the budget to start that process this year. We think that the process would take less than 36 months once it's initiated, probably less, but again, we would have to maintain legacy systems for a while. And then that would be the last piece that's on the mainframe. So this is really the last big piece on the mainframe, is integrated jail and court public safety system. And we do hope to at least start the implementation or start the process towards implementation in FY17. So that's kind of where we are. You see each of these has a yearly maintenance cost moving forward, which I know no one likes to hear, but just being at budget time, I appreciate everything y'all have done in my budget this year, and I do think that with everything budgeted, we'll be able to move forward on these things. A few other highlights that aren't on the list is that we're trying to increase our internet speed, and we're trying to really basically bring back kind of my philosophy is simple. I'm from the mindset you turn on your computers or you turn on your phone, you turn on your technology, and it just like works. And that's what we want to get to. And of course, we know we're not quite there yet, but the goal is for IT is to, when you turn it on, it's like at home or better. So it just like works. And we're used to that with many of our technologies in our life. And that's kind of my goal, is just to make sure that once we turn it on and once we start using it, it works, and that it also is kind of user-friendly and gets efficiency, so that the more efficient we can become when we bring these systems together. The last thing I just wanted to share is the org chart for IT without GIS. GIS would fit in the organizational chart right under the Information Technology Director on that line. Once, and this is current, so once we get that organization actually spelled out and we know all the people involved, I'll come back and share with you the new organizational chart. And as far as where they sit, we're going to leave them where they are sitting now, GIS, until whatever time comes that it is prudent to move them because we don't want to add really any cost to the budget, and we also don't want to interrupt their job. So at some point, we hope we'll be able to move them, but if not, Donna has graciously agreed to keep them until the time comes that we need to move them.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me, I'd like to make another observation about this gentleman. He has done so much in his year and a half with us in the IT department, and I want to tell you just a brief story about yesterday. I had a meeting with what I learned when I walked into the meeting, some IT professionals in my office, and I thought it was going to be about something else, actually, and I had Deputy City Manager Hodge and Deputy City Manager Goodwin and Planning Director Rick Jones present. And when I went into the meeting and these high-tech IT people were talking way above our heads, I sent a text to Forrest as they were talking saying, "Come to my office now." And he was at the annex building. He left the annex building and he made it over to my office before they could get away. And he proceeded, I had him to explain to them, where we were when he came in and where we are today and where we're going from an IT standpoint. And he explained where we were, and they laughed, literally, staff, they laughed. But then he explained where we are today and where we're going, and they started asking them, how many employees do you have? And they were so impressed, and I promise you, I looked at Pam and Deputy City Manager Goodwin and Rick Jones, and they all had smiles on their face because Forrest was talking. And then as Forrest continued to talk, one of the IT professionals turned to me and they said, "You're not going to be able to keep that guy here in Columbus." I mean, that's what he said to me. This is yesterday. And I mean, that's just it just shows the respect that he has, even with IT professionals he did not know, and it showed me what we have here in the investment we made in Forest. So we are headed in a good direction. He has a master plan for getting us where we need to go from an IT standpoint, and we will get there, and he's conscious about how we get there in terms of spending dollars. And so I wanted you to hear that, just to know and be comfortable that we've got someone on board that's doing great work for us, well respected.
Thank you. Thank you, Forrest. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Allen.
I just wanted to ask Forrest, I know nothing about IT, but I was just wondering if there's another system you're talking about going to the cloud, and then I'm looking at the maintenance cost. Is there another system out there that we could go to that'd be less maintenance cost?
All of the systems that you use come with one of two kinds of maintenance cost. If we host it internal, it lasts until our equipment needs replacing. And the last time we came to you to replace just our servers, some of the servers for just a new project, RMS, we spent several hundreds of thousands of dollars. So in the end, when you go to the cloud-based solution, the trade-off is you don't house it internal, but it prevents the big spike in recurrent cost. In other words, once we get the maintenance cost, that's it. And we don't have to come back to you and say, hey, I need $650,000 for RMS in 5 years. And then I don't have to come back and say, well, I need $450,000 for IAS World in 5 years. So kind of what it does is levelize your expenditure so that you can actually budget for it better. In the end result, the cost is about the same. Total cost of ownership may even be a little bit cheaper in the cloud when you factor in that cloud-based solutions have a built-in disaster recovery, not just a backup solution. So that's kind of the trade-off. So you either pay a little bit more now and keep the price constant, or you have spikes in your funding that we don't really enjoy. Like, can't predict that we would have an extra $1 million in 3 or 4 years to spend on the equipment that we purchased, 2 years ago. So that's kind of the two models, that you can keep it on site, and then occasionally you have a huge spike, or either you can budget it, and if you can maintain the budget, then you really don't ever have a spike in your budget. You just keep it kind of level and flat over time.
Okay, there's the $3.4 million in maintenance, is that covering the cost of purchasing computers or laptops or whatever for everybody as needed?
Are we talking about in the financial budgeting system?
Yes.
That's a 10-year, I believe, Pam would have to, that's a 10-year cost. So it would be annualized at, about $345,000? Is that right?
Well, roughly, but does that include the cost of purchasing equipment? Is that the maintenance cost?
It doesn't include the cost of like user computers, but it does include the cost of everything it takes to run the system. So we don't have to maintain that system. In other words, we won't have to buy new servers for that system. We won't have to buy anything new for that system over the 10-year life of this.
Okay, when you talk about going to the cloud, putting it on the cloud, does that mean CSG has its own cloud and that's where we're storing it, or is it somewhere else?
We actually use Microsoft Azure Cloud, or in the case of this vendor, we actually use the vendor's cloud for this particular model. The city uses Azure, but this particular company has their own cloud. So this is CGI, and CGI has their own cloud solution. So that's what it's on, and it's a 2 hardened databases, data centers, and we actually visited one of them to kind of calm our fears as to where it was and how they run it. So,
Was it outside Georgia?
They're outside of Georgia.
Okay.
They're inside the United States.
That's all I wanted to know.
However, some of the cloud solutions we used are based in Georgia. So I could actually show you one of the data centers that we actually have stuff in is one of the locations, because they have multiple replications, is in Atlanta or north of Atlanta in Forsyth.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Forrest, thank you.
And the last one on the agenda today is our Trade Center Director, David Beavens.
David, welcome. Appreciate your patience.
Thank you. It's glad to be here. Thank you, council members, mayor, city manager, and city manager. Thank you for the time for having me today. Our first slide is going to talk a little bit about our history. And it talks about event days and number of events. And you can see they're kind of they're fairly stable. There are some fluctuations over time. I think it's important to note, though, that since the mid part of the 2000s there, late 2000 and 2010, we've had more competition here in the community with the onset of River Mill and Cunningham Center, and also to some extent the Infantry Museum, which hosts social events. So given that, we've been doing pretty well. One of the things that's interesting in our business is that a lot of our events have expanded over to weekends and Sundays. We've had a large increase in those events, more social type, which kind of puts a strain on our staff. We have to spread our staff even further, to cover the shifts through, 7-day and 16-hour days. And I think our budget analyst likes brown to orange. Or not our budget analyst, our finance manager. This talks about our budget. Our personal services are a major part of our budget, which is not untypical. Our operating is 37%, and bonded debt 11%, and cost allocation 3%. We've got workers' comp and capital thrown in there at 2% and 1%. We are asking this year for 2 additional positions. One is a sales assistant to help with the intake of all of our customers, either through walk-in, call-in, that can help qualify, help speed that system up, and then give more qualified leads to our event coordinators, who then go ahead and work with our customers. The second is an operations crew leader. We're finding that we're losing productivity on second and third shifts where we don't have someone in a supervisory role to help with those night tasks and weekend tasks. So that's why we're asking for that second crew leader position. With that said, we are still under the average, according to a PricewaterhouseCoopers survey that's done annually. Our average staff is below convention centers of our size. This gives a little history on our annual P&L. It looks like it's kind of all over the board, but it's really not. We've got some explanations for that. FY11 was in the depths of the recession, which was our worst year in history, but we've been inching our way back. Fiscal year, can't see it on mine, 14 was an outstanding year, in part, though, to $100,000 we received from online hotel settlement. Thank you, City Attorney. Appreciate that. Good work. And then FY15, we did have some capital purchasing and also some other expenses that I'm going to get to in a minute. But we bought a $50,000 stage, and also we started with some expenses in our roof structural assessment and our roof repairs. We spent about $71,000, I think, in that year. And this year we're on, I moved too fast. And this year we're on pace right now through quarter 3. We're at a surplus of $259,000, and we're projecting to be at least $300,000 to the good. However, this money is going in one hand and going out the other. We've made a list. Some of these are best guesses, estimates of imminent projects that we need moving forward at approximately just under $5 million over the next few years. The roof is included in that. We really need another $1 million to complete what was recommended on our roof project, to complete some work in the North Hall and out on the canopy. A lot of the metal roof that you see from street level is about 40 years old and has lots of holes in it. You can't see them, but it allows water in, and then that's where the wood is starting to deteriorate and rot. So they're looking all through that, including the canopy that's out in front of the building. Right now, we are looking at funding boiler replacement, and those are boilers from our expansion, which are only about 12 years old. They need to be replaced, and we're looking at replacing those, as well as our lighting controls. They're 3 generations old already from our new system, and they're not being supported by the manufacturer anymore. So that's going to be about $70,000. The boiler is about $140,000. But as you can see, we have a whole list of projects that basically range from having 40-year-old elevators and escalators. We have the elevator repair out almost every week. to keep them going, and it's just, they could go at any time. And just the things that you all experience in keeping up your own house, wallpaper, repairing walls, landscaping. We also are looking at, in the future, would like to add 4 more operations attendants and some more maintenance workers. Our building takes a tremendous amount of maintenance for 2 reasons. Number one, it's old. The old part is old, obviously, but it's just a very complex building, and we really feel we need to maintain that. It is a jewel of Columbus, and we have to do as much as we can. Right now, we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul to keep things maintained. It just takes a long time to get some things done, and we would like to be able to do a better job, but we can't do it with our level of staffing at this time. And the list goes on for near future. I won't take up your time with that, but you can read that if you want. But down the road, we're going to have to replace the new roof, more carpeting replacements, things like that, which are high dollar items. And this goes to our maintenance costs. You can see a spike in the last 3 years, and that a big part of that is our architectural and structural analysis fees. They've driven up our maintenance costs. Some of it is for some other things that we're trying to do more on a regular basis, like our carpet extraction. We're spending, on the average, about $7,000 a year just on carpet extraction to keep a carpet fresh and keep the building clean. And going back to our architectural and structural fees, as I mentioned, we spent about $71,000 in fiscal year 14. That figure has gone up to 81 in fiscal year 15, and we're already at 92,000 in fiscal year 16, and we haven't even started to pay for construction yet, actual construction. So those costs are coming. One of the things that we're really proud of is our electrical usage, and we're trying to be more efficient for a couple reasons. We've gained these decreases in our kilowatt hours used. One is basically we're just zoning the building. We're only energizing parts of the building that we're using, and we're trying to get better about turning lights off throughout the building. But actually, the air conditioning is the biggest draw. We're also relamped the exhibit halls, and that's cut our kilowatts used by half in just the exhibit halls. And also, we've just recently, last month, completed changing out the lights in the garage, almost 200 instruments to LED lights. We've totally done that in-house, all the labor. We paid for that through our operating budget. We're looking at about a 3-year payback period, and after that, we're looking at $5,000 a year in savings. And that's my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilor Thomas.
Give us I know that you are currently doing some repairs and so forth at the Trade Center, the roof and those kinds of things. Can you give us an idea of some of the kinds of things that you're doing and a timeline?
Yes, ma'am. Basically, for the structural repair, mainly it involves the South Hall, some of it over the dining gallery. That's the room where Rotary meets every week because that's part of the original structure. But most of the structural issues are in the South Hall, where there's been a lot of shifting over the years. The main beams have take a lot of weight from the roof, and it's basically old, and over time things have shifted, things have cracked. Then we've got also water intrusion that has rotted some of the wood. So right now they're stabilizing those beams. They're basically attaching new metal plates to where the roof beams and the vertical beams meet to stabilize those structures, and also some of the horizontal beams that go across. Then they're going to start looking at the roof and opening that up and repairing any of the wood there that is rotted due to the water intrusion. That's all. It all has to be custom made because it's so old. Nobody makes roof material that's actually tongue and groove. It's kind of like, you know, in your house where you have a tongue and groove floor. Well, these roof members for the subroof are all tongue and groove, so that had to be manufactured, and we don't know how much damage there is until they start going day by day and taking off the metal, then taking off. There's 2 levels of asphalt shingles on there from olden days. So until they get that opened up, they won't know how much damage there is. They're estimating to be done maybe October, November.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? David, you do a great job. That's a wonderful facility, and man, every time we go in there, it makes you proud.
Thank you.
That it's in Columbus. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you.
And that concludes the budget review session for today. The next budget review session is next Tuesday, May 17th. It is a special called meeting. There's no council meeting that day. It will start at 9 a.m. And currently, we have 3 departments, the Police Department, Public Works, and the Civic Center.
And reminder to the committee that if there's anybody that you would like to hear from, you need to make sure that Ms. Hodge knows. All right? If there's no further business. Move the second. All in favor, say, let's go.